this, otherwise it won't do it. So
decisions.
Welcome back to Night Flight. I'm Judith Quover, and today I'm here with, oh my goodness, Wayne McRoy. Can you believe that for a split second? Really? I couldn't. My goodness, this is so embarrassing. Anyway, Wayne McRoy is here, and he is an author, a researcher, and you might know him. His YouTube channel is Alchemical Tech Revolution, and you might have met him on Secrets of Saturn. He is regularly on that channel. And today he's here, and we will talk a little bit about the concept of time and the yugas. And so, Wayne, welcome.
It's good to be here, Judith. Thanks for having me on. I always like to explore new platforms and meet new listeners. So this should be an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Time is just something that's one of those things where, you know, it's very interesting how it works, and people have a lot of different conceptions as to what exactly it is and how things operate. And you know, as we talk about it here further, we'll see how things are cyclical. Okay, and we go through different cycles of time, and you know, we go through different periods in history that repeat themselves, and they always say history repeats itself, and that's true. And we're existing in a time now where it's a changeover between ages, and that's kind of the place where my research has taken me at this point. We've come to a point where the powers that be are seriously pushing this idea of the changeover of ages and going into the quote unquote age of Aquarius. And, you know, as hokey as all that sounds, as we, you know, thinking of 1960s music and stuff like that, it's actually something that's true. And they've actually traced this back, going through the different cycles of time through the astrological calendar, looking at different concepts of the different ages we've been in. And, you know, we are, I think, in the transitory period here between the ages. We're exiting what they would call the age of Pisces and entering the age of Aquarius, which is an age of air. So we're going from an age of water to an age of air. And there's a lot of different ideas that are really encapsulated in these different concepts. Like, for example, we're transitioning from this age of water, and this age could be said to be the age of exploration of the earth and travel around the earth, and done so primarily through means of, you know, over the oceans, the water. And much of our legal system and all of our other systems are based upon this premise. Okay, so when we're looking at our law system, our courts of law, they're all tied up in the idea of maritime admiralty law. And this also has to do with trade, which goes back to the Phoenicians, if you look back in the ancient history. So we're talking about things of that nature. So our whole society is pretty much built on the premise of a water age. And that's where we are. Our law system, our commerce system, all of that is all based in maritime admiralty law. And that's kind of one of the things that goes along with it. And our language especially is based within this concept as well. Even things like, you know, for example, in our monetary system, well, where do you go for your money? You go to the bank, which is like the bank of a river, right? And what do we exchange? Currency, the current of the sea, you know. So like all of these ideas, our language, especially the English language, which I think is actually more of a constructed language for these types of ideas, because it takes different old language words and kind of mishmashes them together into something slightly different, but still retaining the original meanings. And most people don't realize that these things retain their original meanings. And this all has to do with alchemical's concept based upon that. And I sound like I'm rambling here, and I apologize for that, but all these different ideas kind of stream together. So we could see how much of the world that we've been familiar with for so long has been based in these maritime type ideas. Even, you know, the names of things, maritime, Mary being, you know, the mother of Jesus. And like all these ideas stem back to these ancient archetypes once again. Mare being the sea. Mare is the old word that means the sea, or Mars. Mars is the sea. All of these different ideas, it all relates back to elemental water. And that's the age that we are currently transitioning from into this new age of Aquarius with all these different air type ideas. So I foresee in the near future, we're going to transfer our monetary system from what we're familiar with, this currency that we're familiar with, to digital currency. See, the digital encapsulates the idea of air. There's nothing there's nothing physical behind it. It's nebulous. It's very wispy. And these different air ideas are all contrived into the whole digital idea. So when we look at that, like, all of these things are going to change. And that's the reason why they're using this whole concept of the quote unquote gray reset to really encapsulate the monetary ideas and the different banking ideas that are going on right now. And that's one of the main drivers of what's going on in the world today, is this whole concept of we're switching between these ages, and we need to change up how we do business and how we do commerce in the world today. So these ideas are all drawn together into the whole idea of the switchover of ages. And there's a lot more to it. And this all ties into what I would call the technocracy. And that's something that's coming full steam ahead, whether people are ready for it or not, or want to admit that that's the thing that it is or not. So that's one of the main drivers of everything going on in society today. And they've used the situation at hand as the catalyst to, kind of push forward all these different ideas and to bring this all into fruition. And this has been planned for a long time. And, on Secrets of Saturn channel, when we look at various documents and stuff like that, we could demonstrate to you all day long that many of these things have been planned well ahead of time. They've been thoroughly thought out, and they're just kind of bringing these ideas to the forefront now and steering the people in this direction through a science called social engineering. And that's one of the primary things we focus on over on that channel. Now, Judith has mentioned, I don't know if people here might not be familiar with me. I am an author and researcher. I do have 3 books out there currently. And a lot of the ideas I've looked at relate back to how this coming technocracy and all these technological ideas relate back to the ancient mystery schools, and how this all ties back to what we would now call alchemy, and how many of these ideas are far older than we would think they are, and how they're using this technology to bring about these changes that they've been looking for. Their so-called quote unquote great work that the secret societies talk about. That's what they're looking to bring into fruition through the use of high technologies. And that's primarily what I write about. And the ultimate culmination of these technologies and the ultimate goal is something called transhumanism. I don't know if many of your listeners are familiar with transhumanism, but that's the primary thing that I write about and against, is because this advent of transhumanism will be the biggest enslavement of humankind that's ever been, and the greatest culling of humankind that's ever been. So when we look at the ideas associated with transhumanism, we can see how many of them do not benefit society at large, even though they're presented to you as a benefit for society. So that's basically the vantage point that I take. Excuse me.
So, okay, sorry, are you finished?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I didn't want to interrupt you. So, do you have any idea when we started here in the Western world thinking that time is linear, when that really took a foothold?
That's a good question. I don't think anybody could really pin down the exact time. Well, that's one of those things that's nebulous about time, is how do we know when we started to realize, or when we started to explore time as being a linear thing? Yeah. I think ancient societies were a little more savvy than we give them credit for. And I think, time in essence, ancient man understood that time is just something that's not necessarily linear, that it's just a measure when it comes down to it. Time is a measurement made by man. And that's the thing. I mean, we could know certain things based upon times and seasons, based upon the sky and the clock in the sky that we have. You can know things by the position of the sun, the position of the moon, the position of the stars. You could understand what season you're in with that and the different changes in nature around you. And that's how ancient man initially gauged the ideas of time, is with, the observations they made from nature. So when you look at nature as your timepiece, you'll understand more so where we are than what you would by our artificial means that we have via clocks now and things like that. So, when you look at things from that perspective, you could know certain things. And the whole idea of this switching of ages that we were just talking about prior, that all ties into this as well, because that's all based upon the sky clock. That's all based upon the movement of the stars and the sun and the moon. Mm. So when we use nature as our observation point, we can know certain things about where we are in the quote unquote time cycle. And that's the other thing. All things are cyclical, and that the sky clock proves this out as well, because you could see year after year, the sun will make its rotation through the sky and turn up in the same places on the solstices and stuff year after year. It's been observed all through written history, through what we can observe as our history right now. And all these ideas predate our historical records, our written historical records. So man has been watching the sky for the longest time, for as long as we've been around. And who could say for sure how long that's really been? These ideas of time are pretty arbitrary, since it is a man-made measurement, and we've only been keeping records for so long. And many of the important things have been passed down through oral tradition, even predating written history, like written records of these things. So man has, for a long time kept record of different things and has observed these different cycles of time and has written about them in different ways. And we began measuring them in different ways. For example, our calendars that we use. And we've gone through how many different calendars through the ages. I mean, if you look at where we are, who could say for sure which calendar's right? See, that's the whole thing. Like, a lot of these ideas are pretty arbitrary. We can't really know with any certainty what happened much before our lifetime.
Yeah, our calendar is pretty messed up. Yeah, I mean,
December
definitely. Is 10, not 12. September, right. 7, not 9.
Right. And that dates back to ancient Rome. Mm-hmm. See, Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar put 2 more months into the calendar. Mm. And when they did that, I mean, it throws off everything when you look at it. They made July and August. They named those months after themselves and inserted them, in the middle of the year there. So you could kind of see how that would screw things up in and of itself. Because when you observe the cycle of nature, and depending on what kind of a calendar you use, like there's a lunar calendar or the solar calendar, and I think each has its appropriate use depending on the period of time you're trying to measure. Like if you're trying to measure in long periods of time, using the solar calendar is better. And if you're trying to measure shorter periods, the lunar calendar would be better if you were to get back to a more natural type viewpoint on this stuff, or using nature as your clock. Whereas, a month lasts 28 days. So you could see, a month be 28 days. So if you add 3 days to a month and you do that for a number of years, well, that throws the whole timing of everything off, doesn't it, when it comes down to it? So you could see, and then if you insert 2 extra months into the calendar, you could see how it totally screwed things up. So like I said, it's kind of an arbitrary number we put on things. They are based on some substantial things. Mostly they are based on the sky clock, the cycles of the moon and the sun and things of that nature. But there's also a lot of man-made dogma and stuff thrown in there as well.
Mm. Yeah. I have one quote here that is from a Tibetan Rinpoche. And he said, until concepts are exhausted, there is time and you make preparations. However, you should not grasp onto time as truly existent. And you should know that within the essential nature of Mahamudra, time does not exist. So, and the Mahamudra is literally means the great seal. And that has to do with the realization of the natural state as awareness, emptiness, absolutely clear and transparent without a root. And yes, that was a mouthful, and you could do an entire show on that. I just wanted to boil it down, what Mahamudra is. And they also, I mean, the entire Buddhist teachings about emptiness are not the most simplest one that one can understand, but a very interesting concept. And I have a feeling there is something to it. You know, there's one level, yes, it is okay. It's easy. For instance, we can figure out a time when we do that interview. Yeah.
Right.
We adjust the time difference, so and so forth. So there are, yeah, positive sides to it. But because we constantly do it and so often, and then you have the impression this is it, this is time.
Right. And it's far different. Like time actually is something far different than how we would actually observe it in this way, because, you know, even though it is a handy tool to be able to say, okay, we'll do the interview at such and such a time, like it's 3 p.m. for me here and, you know, 9 p.m., you know, somewhere else, and that kind of thing. But we could take a look at this and be able to, you know, get to the same place at the same time through this. But this kind of loses sight of the natural world when we operate in this system. And time in the natural world, basically, it doesn't really exist as a thing. It's more of a cycle. It's not really how we would think of it, that as, you know, being time in our modern inclinations here. But it exists within a cyclical nature, but it doesn't really exist as an entity unto itself within nature. And that's the thing. So like present, past, and future kind of all could exist simultaneously. It's just a matter of, you know, where we are right now within the nature of the world, within the natural world here. So all these things don't exist outside of each other. And one proof we could look at this for is to just look at the golden mean, the golden ratio. When you look at this, the Fibonacci sequence, it goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. Now the first 5 numbers there, the only one skipped is 4. And 4 is always associated within the ancient Pythagorean type thinking and philosophy as being the number of time. So time is skipped within this golden ratio upon which most of our reality becomes manifest. So time is an arbitrary thing when it comes down to it. Yes, it's cyclical, and we do go through these cycles and seasons within nature, but it's not really the type of thing we would think of it as. It doesn't exist in the same way as something tangible. Okay, like you know, this physical reality in which we live. We could pick up soil. All right, we could understand. Okay, this is dirt. This is earth. We could reach in and feel water, and no, this is a physical, real thing. Time is not something that you could grasp a hold of. It's not a material thing, and people think of it in such a way. And time is a valuable commodity in our modern world because we only have so much of it here. But that once again ties back to the cyclical nature of things. See, it's a really abstract concept when it comes down to it. So I don't know if I'm making a lot of sense here, but in the natural world, time is an abstract thing. It's not something that you could, you know, set your clock on. You know, when your clock says it's 12 noon, that's based upon when the sun is supposed to be directly overhead. Okay, so the sun is not always directly over your head when your clock says it's 12 noon. And that's because we've gone away from the natural way of telling time. And in so doing, like we've kind of lost the whole concept of what time really means within the natural setting or within the natural world. Now, we do go through seasons and cycles, And that's more of what it's about in the natural. Okay. And it's not really, it doesn't exist like outside of nature. All right. Whereas we look at it as an abstract concept that exists outside of nature in a certain way. When we actually put numbers on it, we count numerically. There's 24 hours in a day, and there's 60 minutes in an hour. And when we break it down like that, the natural world doesn't always reflect that. It doesn't always run on that time scale like we do as society. So it's kind of a contrived artificial thing that we've done with it. Whereas, in nature, you can know the seasons, like the true equinox would happen when there's equal day and night. And the equinoxes now in the calendar year don't necessarily fall on those days or those times where it's equal day and night for most people. So we kind of lose something in the process here when we look at time through the constructed man-made way that we view it now. And that's something I think we need to get back to. We need to get our ties back to the natural world because many things within the natural world operate in a significantly different way than what we do when we're approaching things in a wholly artificial way. And when we see these natural energies inherent in nature, we could use them to our advantage if we understand what we're looking at as far as where we are in the cycle or the season, or the part of the day within nature. Whereas we lose all of that information when we go to something strictly numerical. And this ties back to the whole idea of our modern science. Our modern science is obsessed with trying to quantify everything. You have to count everything. If you can't count it, it doesn't exist. And they do that's basically one of the major flaws with our modern science. If you can't quantify it, it doesn't exist. And this gives us ideas like quantum ideas, atomistic ideas. This goes back to the philosophy of atomism. When you look at things like this, they try to describe everything in terms of an absolute minuscule particle. They break everything down into particulate forms. Okay. Everything has an absolute particle or value. And that's not always what we observe in nature, is it? Many things are subjective. Our experience is subjective. You can't quantify somebody's experience, especially when it comes to things that you would consider like supernatural or paranormal. That stuff cannot really truly be quantified, can it? And science will deny many of these ideas because they cannot objectively measure it. And if they can't objectively measure it, then they say that's not science, and they discount the idea altogether. And that's a flaw with our modern science, because many things in this world are subjective and are experiential, and it doesn't make them any less real than something you could particularly count or measure. And that's kind of the same approach we've taken with time. Okay, if we can't objectively count it or measure it, then they throw it out the window. So that's why they started counting. We have a 24-hour day, 60-minute hours, and this kind of thing. And then they jacked up the calendar and made certain months are 31 days, some months are 30, and then there's one that's 28, but it's sometimes 29. Like think about that. It doesn't even make sense the way they throw it all together. Whereas I'm pretty convinced that there was an older cycle of time where the days were counted differently. Okay. And the times were measured differently, and the calendars were actually done very differently. And we've lost something in the transition there. And what that thing is that we lost is a connection to the natural world.
Do you have internet problems? It's always telling me you do not have enough bandwidth.
You know what? Maybe I'll switch to just audio. I haven't been having bandwidth
but
problems
it's okay.
here lately.
I never lost you or anything.
Okay.
So would be nice to see you.
Okay. I'll stay on screen then. But at the same token, I do sometimes, because of where I live, I'm kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So okay. Our internet options are very limited. So I do have the highest bandwidth available in my area right now, but it's not like the number one amount that's available everywhere else. But that's a trade-off I'll take any day for living away from the city. So
yeah. I don't blame you. I hear you. I live close to a city, but the area where I am is very rural, and then I live in the middle of a sanctuary. So yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, it's definitely better. I would rather be further from the city. I am kind of in a rural type spot out where I'm at. So I'm good with that.
So fine. Now let's do something exciting. A screen share.
Oh boy.
So can you see that?
Yes, I do.
So here we have the idea of the yugas. And I have to say, when you dig into this here with the 24,000 years, there are other numbers like 25,920 years. Then there is another one that says something along the lines of 24,600, something like that. So it's, you can dispute this, but in general, it makes, to me, it makes sense that they have this 12,000 years ascending and then the 12,000 years descending.
Right. And this ties back to the cyclical nature of things once again. And I could see how that may be the case. And I think we're finally on the ascendant now, whereas for the longest time we've been on the descendant. So now I would see as where we're at would be down here, you know, in the Kali Yuga, at the end of the Iron Age on the uptick here. And it doesn't look like that when we look at how things are going in the world today. But you have to understand, in order for us to actually, how should we say this, to mature and to benefit, we have to be tested. Okay, so we're going to go through some testing, and we're going to go through some trials. We have to be purified to come out on the other end. And you know, we're being squeezed right now, but I do see us on the verge of the uptick here. When we're looking at where we're at, I would say that this is probably the end of the Iron Age, and we're moving forward into this new age, as I had alluded to earlier. So with that being said, we should be on the ascendant here. And now we could see, like right now, we're in the transitory phase. Okay, we're in this transition phase between these ages, and you know, when we get to the other side, I think we'll be better for it, but it's going to be a tough few years here coming up. And how long will that last? Who could say for sure? That's the thing. But I mean, we're going to go through this process, and this all ties back to the alchemical ideas once again. I mean, the transmuting of lead into gold once again. So you see, in order to get to the golden age, we have to go through the fires first and, you know, be purified. So,
and that is, you know, the longest period, the golden age.
Yeah.
So Wayne, we definitely picked the wrong, the wrong slot, so to say.
Well, these are exciting times to live in, though. I mean, really, you have to try and maintain some positivity among things. I mean, let's say that, you know, it's interesting living in these times, isn't it?
Yes.
There's never a dull moment.
And I know in ancient times, there have been, you know, that understood that there will be this culminating point that would have loved to live during this age and seeing it. And we will see. Personally, I don't think that I will experience here Dvapara Yuga. But I think we can lay the foundation. So maybe here, okay, golden age, yeah. There you have love, you have no idea of separation. That is, you have no classes in society. Very strange, because today the Hindu society has all kinds of it's a caste, how do you say that, caste system, caste system?
Caste system,
yeah. Okay, so and knowledge, virtue, love, and long life expectancy. Longevity goes along with that as well.
Right. And these ideas all cycle back to ancient times once again, because, in the times that were what we would call pre-Adamic, or what we would even refer to as the Adamic times, we supposedly lived in this golden age where the world was a lush paradise. And, we didn't have the issues that we have now. And this ties back to ideas, biblical ideas like original sin and the Garden of Eden. Once again, this ties back to the Golden Age idea. And many of these cultures and stuff all have many of these common stories in common together, like I just said. So like a lot of these different ideas, they transcend cultures and time. And we're looking at here, it says it's like roughly a 24,000 year cycle. I don't think there's really any way we could know for sure how long of a cycle these things run for, but we could observe the natural world and realize from when we have been recording things in a written record, we can notice certain things that happen within these different time periods, these certain cycles. Okay, we can see these cyclical changes that go on through these different ages that we've recorded. So with that being said, I think there is some truth to these ideas. There's a period of descending, and then there's a period of ascending, and we've experienced what we could call this golden age, and then we've fallen from grace from that golden age, and through what they would call original sin, or the concept of original sin in the biblical narrative. And we've gone through these many ages, and we've pretty much reached the rock bottom part of it, I think, at this point with our modern society. And that's why I would say I'm thinking this changeover of the ages that's measured through the movement of the sky clock, through the measurement of the stars and the sun and the different cycles. We could say we're going to be on the ascendant here, that we're in this transitory period between these ages now. And we will be moving forward, and things will get better. And see, that's a promise that we get from the Creator. Things will improve and get better. And we go through these different cycles. And, no man is exempt from having to go through these different cycles of hardship and troubled times. And, but we will see good times. And this is all actually addressed in the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, whereas there's a time for everything, and everything is beautiful in its time. And this once again talks about the idea of time being something cyclical, and how we all go through all of these different phases in our lives and different phases in the ages here, and how all these things are beautiful in their time in certain different ways. How we could see the good that manifests from it. And that's the thing, even though we see evil manifest at times through these different things, we also see good. And like I said, we go through the descending time, and we'll go through the ascending time. Yeah. So I think we're going to be on the upward tick here coming up. I think we're going to go through some rough times the next couple of years here. And who knows how long that will last. I mean, that may be the rest of our lifetimes here. I don't know. I can't say. I don't have the answers for that. But I do see something positive coming as a result of all these trials and this testing that we're going through. And that's a promise made to us by the Creator. And, in the Bible, it even says all things will work together for good for those who trust in God and are called according to his purpose. So if you have a right relationship with your Creator, you could rest assured that there's going to be reward after the hardship. And that's something that I lean upon heavily. Knowing that some good is going to come from anything bad that comes along. And that's something we could, bank on when it comes down to it. Even though it looks like times of trouble are ahead, I think when we come out the other side of it, we'll be better off for it. Now, that may not look exactly how we picture it, but who would think that the quote unquote future that we're living in now, like if you think back to like the 1980s or something, looking ahead at the year 2020, who would have pictured it like this? Think about that. I thought about things of flying cars and, space travel and all of this stuff. I didn't think about everybody be walking around with a mask on their face, afraid to go near each other. Like think about that. So who knows? The future may not look exactly how we think it will. So, with that in mind, we can know we'll come out better on the other side for it, though. So we may be going through some tough times ahead, but I think on the other side of it, we'll come out better for it.
And interestingly enough, here, the next age, the Silver Age, there is already a little bit more materialism. Materialism doesn't seem to be a big subject during the Golden Age, but I found it interesting that what we call social classes, that actually was built during the Dwapara Yuga. It wasn't even here. And what is also going on is the obsession and fascination with the outside world.
Right. I think
that has its height in the Kali Yuga, where all the focus is on the outside world. And when I look at the zombies walking around with their cell phones, I have to say, I see that on a daily basis.
Absolutely. I agree with you there. I mean, when you look back at the idea of the Golden Age, this was a time when people were more concerned with spiritual things. And even coming up through that Silver Age and into the Bronze Age there, people were more concerned with spiritual things. But at some point, after we hit that tipping point in the Bronze Age where these caste systems and such have come about, and these different social classes have come about, things started to shift to the materialistic view. Okay. And the world we exist in now is based on hyper-materialism, what I would call hyper-materialism. They're so obsessed with everything being something physical here. It's all very hyper-materialist. Okay. Everything, even our science, is based upon this idea. Like I said, they try to quantify everything. This is the hyper-materialist viewpoint. They're trying to eliminate any kind of spiritual ideas or philosophical ideas from our conception of reality. And that's what goes on in this hyper-materialist view. And this, once again, leads into the idea of technocracy and transhumanism. That's basically, many of the premises that those ideas are built upon, is this hyper-materialist view. Because if you view consciousness, inherent consciousness in people, as being nothing more than a physical byproduct of the electrical activity of your brain and your nervous system, then you would view the idea of transferring your consciousness into, say, a machine or another vessel as being something that's very possible. If you could break this down as to little more than an algorithm, as your consciousness just being the byproduct of these electrical phases of the nervous system, then that would be very possible, wouldn't it? Many of our scientists and stuff that are pursuing these types of technologies, that's exactly how they view the world. And this comes once again down to the idea of the philosophy of atomism, the quantifying of everything. And that's right, even in the ideas that they call quantum science. Quantify, quantum, think about it. They're counting everything. They're trying to break everything down into fundamental particles. It doesn't always work that way. See, that's the thing when you observe nature.
And I find it so, the money that they spend on that, look at CERN and, all these, and that's not the only particle accelerator, every major country has them. So, wow. And that is a lot of money that is spent there.
Oh, absolutely. And that's because they're viewing, they're trying to steer the viewpoint of the public at large into this hyper-materialist system. See, they want everybody to think in terms of quantifiable things or quantum, or, everything is the product of a fundamental particle of some sort. And that's the tact that they're taking.
Particle.
Right. They even named it the God particle, the Higgs boson. Yeah, that's the thing. They even named it the God particle. They want people to view everything in this hyper-materialist bent, because if they don't switch what the public accepts as reality into this model, then they have no basis for proceeding with this technocracy and this transhumanist singularity, as they call it. So they're trying to shift everybody's point of view to this. And this relates back to an old Hermetic idea, too, the Hermetic principle of mentalism, where thought precedes everything. Okay. And here's the thing: if they could change the public's mind and get them to perceive their reality in this way, then to some extent, they could manifest this thing in our reality.
Yeah,
and they realize that.
It for them.
Right. That's exactly what they want. They put this programming out there. And this is what I would call social engineering or social programming. They put these ideas out there for people to pick up on and to, put their thought and their focus and their will into. And that's an important principle, too, when it comes back to these things, these different alchemical thoughts and ideas, will. So people put their will into this idea, the thought that everything is composed of these material particles, these basic particles. So that this is how they manifest this hyper-materialist view in our reality. They use people's thought processes against them to try to bring this into fruition. And they explain these different natural phenomenon in that way, even though it doesn't always add up. But they can manipulate the math to make it look however they want. And that's exactly what they do, because you could use math to describe anything when it comes down to it. And that's exactly what they do with these conceptual ideas, these quantum ideas. Can't prove it in an actual physical experiment, but as a thought experiment, you write it down on paper in a mathematical formula, and it could make sense. And that's exactly what they do with this stuff. Now, they're doing very real experiments and stuff at places like CERN, but I don't think that it's working, that the whole system works or operates in the way that they tell us that it does. I think there's something else entirely going on. I'm sorry?
What do you think they are really doing there?
Well, here's the thing, something with CERN, okay? They claim they're finding all these new particles and they're measuring these particles. Now, the only person that could know for sure what's really happening there is the one that programs the computer that detects these particles, right? So, there's secret compartmentalized things going on there, and they'll admit that. But when you take a look at the background of CERN and things that go on there, well, they have a statue of Shiva sitting on their front lawn. First of all, that should be a telling point for people. It's a 17-mile circle that the CERN's Large Hadron Collider runs in. 17 is a very occult number for a lot of different reasons that we won't get into here. But when you see that, it's a circle. It's a summoning circle. It's a giant summoning circle if you're going back to these ancient alchemical type ideas or these quote unquote magical type ideas. When you look at this stuff, these different occult principles behind things, it's a big occult mind control operation, pretty much, when it comes down to it. It's trying to steer the public consciousness into believing in this cult of quantum. That's pretty much my viewpoint as to what's going on. It's done as a manipulation. It's to steer public consciousness into believing these different scientific principles and ideas. And it's very well funded, and people have made entire careers on this. And they think on these principles, and they're taught these principles in their universities and stuff, and they never have any reason to question them because they keep getting the funding for it, and they keep tweaking the programs to find these new particles. They call it a particle zoo. They've identified all these different particles now, including this supposed Higgs boson, which allegedly gives mass to different things, like all fundamental things. And there's no proof of that. Like there's no way to prove that. When you so far, all it is a ping on a computer.
When you say summon, do you think that they are trying portals to other, let's say, dimensions, or to other entities, to unseen realms?
Well, it's hard to say for sure what exactly is going on there in that regards. I would say mankind is a very curious being, and the occultists, going all the way back into the ancient mystery schools and before written history, have always thought in terms of there being multiple dimensions, multiple worlds, things like the archetypal world or the ethereal, the astral, these different planes of existence. So they could be trying to use scientific tools to tap into that type of a thing, in my view. So, I mean, it's definitely a possibility. I don't think anybody could prove for sure what it is exactly they're working on there. But all I know is there's a ton of money funneled into it. And the whole operation is very, I can't say secretive per se. I mean, a lot of it is secretive, but like it's not very forthcoming with their findings. And the things that they do release to the public, it's all jargon when it comes down to it. With like many of these sciences, they release everything in these big long form jargon studies and stuff in these peer reviewed journals and stuff that you have to have a subscription and pay X amount of dollars for every year to actually read the studies. And it's all loaded with jargon and nobody really reads them. They just read the what they would call the abstract in the beginning and the conclusions at the end, because it's all just jargon and nonsense, and they manipulate and cherry pick data to show whatever it is they decide they want to show in this particular paper. So that's what they do. And it's like I said, it's very well funded. And I don't think it operates in the way that they tell us it does. I have this to say about all science. All of our science, I think, is misdescribed to us. There's very real effects and stuff that they could use, manipulate with many of these technologies, but it doesn't operate how it's described to us. And this goes back once again to this basic premise of this atomistic philosophy compared to, what we would call in the modern realm, ether physics. And ether physics disappeared from the modern vernacular in the late 1800s and early 1900s with the rise of popular figures like Einstein. They've never disproven ether theory on any of this stuff. And this ties back to ancient occult ideas too. And many of the people at the topmost levels of our power structure are very aware of this concept of ether and how it interrelates with things and how this ether physics is, a legitimate thing. And I think the way that they present the atomistic view to us of these things is in complete contradiction to how it really operates under the parameters of this ether theory. So with that being said, I mean, there are different black budget programs and special access programs within the auspices of military industrial contractors that utilize these ether physics and know how to use them and know how things really work. But we don't ever see the light of day with that stuff in the public realm. So because they're trying to push this idea of quantum, okay, the quantifiable, the hypermaterialist idea, because they want the public to latch onto the hypermaterialist idea. And there's two reasons for that. Excuse me. I got to clear my throat there. Sorry, I have a little cold or something that just keeps coming up every now and again. But there's a couple different reasons for that, why they want people to think in terms of quantum or quantifiable or in the hypermaterialist viewpoint. Because first of all, if you're thinking in that way and the world doesn't really operate in that way, well, then you don't know how things really operate. If you don't know how things really operate, you don't know where it is you live, right? And if you don't know where you're at, how do you know where you could go? You don't. They want people clueless. That's the bottom line. You're more controllable when you're confused. So they keep the confusion alive with these different ideas. And also, I would say the other reason for this is because they want you to buy into this so that you'll support the things that they want to do with technocracy. So, if you're thinking in these terms and all they're feeding you is in these terms, you're going to think, absurd ideas are possible with these different things, like the concept of maybe being able to transfer your consciousness into a machine and live forever. Sounds absurd, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't think that is possible.
I don't either. But see, here's the thing. If you believe in the hyper-materialist viewpoint, you would believe it's possible. And that's why they're trying to steer human consciousness into believing in that stuff. See, and here's the biggest secret at the topmost level of the power structure that they don't want people to know. This whole advent of transhumanism and all these different technologies that they're pushing and saying could really benefit mankind and bring mankind to the next level of evolution and all of this stuff, that's not intended for you and me. That's only for the people at the topmost levels of the power structure. And that's the big secret that they don't want you to know. That's why they make it sound so good when they push these ideas. Okay. Oh, this could help countless people. These different ideas, it could help countless people, medical breakthroughs, this, that, and the other thing. Well, here's the thing. they do not intend for what they call the quote unquote the profane, and that's you and me. They have no place for the profane in their new age. That's the bottom line. And that's why there's been all this talk of the culling of the population and everything else. Like, this stuff is really out there in the literature. They have white papers and stuff talking about it. It's not conjecture. It's not conspiracy theory, as people would think. All these different ideas are out there in the open literature. Anybody can find them. All you got to do is do a basic internet search.
Written in stone.
Right. In the Georgia Guidestones, they wrote it in stone. It's literally written in stone. But people still won't believe it because of the cognitive dissonance. So they wouldn't do that. No, you wouldn't do that, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't do that. These people are psychopaths, the ones in charge. They don't care about you or your health. And that's the whole thing going on today. They don't care about your health. You really think they care about your health? They don't. None of this is about your health. Never was. So, with that being said, I mean, that's why they push this hyper-materialist viewpoint of things, is because they want the people to latch onto it so that they don't have any resistance to the things they want to do. So, when they move forward with these ideas, people will think it's a good thing. And if you buy into the hyper-materialist view, you think it's great and you'll have nothing to lose and, everything to gain. And that's why they push those ideas.
Yeah. So another thing that is a little bit foreign to us, you mentioned Shiva in front of CERN. Mm-hmm. And to us, it's really strange to have a destroyer god. Yeah. Yeah. Because our idea of God is totally different. And even in Buddhism, you will find, let's say, dakinis, yidams, or bodhisattvas, or whatever. And sometimes they are depicted in their angry form, and then the same entity is depicted in a protective and helping form. So that is very foreign to us, because we have it very clearly separated. Yeah, here is the devil and there is God. And right. So I think we Westerners, we do not quite know what to make of this, yeah, with the destroyer gods and angry forms and helpful forms. And
right. And I agree. I mean, a lot of Western thought has been separated from many of these ideas that have been brought forward by the more Eastern cultures. And even they have been a little bit convoluted from what the original meaning of these things were. Yeah. Now, when you look at like the destroyer archetype, that's usually followed by a rebirth. Okay. And that's what this intends. It's all goes back to the whole cyclical idea. Once again, the idea of time, like we were discussing with the yugas, the destroyer, that's on the descendant. And then there will be the ascendant or the rebirth. It's the idea of the phoenix brought forth by the mystery schools. The phoenix is the bird that emulates itself and destroys itself and then is reborn as a new being. It's this kind of a concept. So when you look at all these different ideas, it transcends cultures. It transcends time and cultures. All these ideas are, pretty much archetypal in their delivery. So people will basically inherently understand them, in an unconscious type way without having a real physical or surface understanding of what's going on with it. So you see this and it's a symbol. Okay. So like if you see the destroyer, Shiva, on the front lawn, it's a symbol representing the destruction of the materialist view here, or like the material world that we live in. It's the destruction archetype. Okay. And that's kind of where we're at, because we're hitting the bottom now, where we're going to come into the ascendant. This always is a precursor of the rebirth. So you could see the idea inherent in there. And there's different levels of meaning to all these different symbols, depending on, what your frame of reference is. And that's an important thing, because within the secret societies and these mystery school teachings, there's different layers of meanings in all these different symbols. And you're taught through different initiatory rites as you go through what these different levels of meaning are in many of these different symbols. So this could be representing something different to somebody who's quote unquote in the know, who sees that sitting there. Whereas we look at it and we say, oh, it's Shiva, it's the god of destruction. They're trying to kill us all. That might not be the message they're trying to get out to what they would call a fellow adept or something along those lines. So like they communicate in this way all the time. It's all out there in the open, but it's all done through symbology. So symbology is an important language for people to understand.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we have a similar thing with the statue in Daniel in the Bible, the golden head, the silver chest, the bronze legs, and then
the feet are a mixture of clay and iron. Yep.
So meaning you find this idea of different ages throughout all cultures.
Right.
Even to me, the statue of Daniel corresponds. Yeah,
Gotta love cats. They have no sense of timing at all, which once again goes back to the very topic we're discussing.
Here's my co-host. She always has to be on the show. So, but you know what I mean, yeah? That it, at first glance, it might not be connected, but I think there is a deep connection to all these yugas and these ideas of time being cyclical in that statue of Daniel. What do you think?
I absolutely agree. I mean, it's inherent in the materials the statue's made of. You have gold, silver, bronze, and then iron mixed with clay. There's a reason it's mixed with clay, because that speaks to, once again, like I said, the transitory period between the ages, where we're also not only switching ages, but we're switching from the descending to the ascending side of it. So when you look at it from that vantage point, you could see how these ideas, they have a common source when it comes down to it, depending, even though it transcends different cultures and times, you could see there's an actual common source there between all of it. So this is an archetypal idea, okay, that transcends all of culture, that mankind could resonate with. So we could see there's this period where it's a golden age, the silver age, bronze age, and we descend. And then there's also the ascension of it. So we could see how man has fallen from grace, and he now exists in the sin world, and he's going to renew back to that golden age at some point. He goes through this transition phase. Now, we could argue all day long about, how long of a time period is this, and, how long is an age, and how long does this last or that last. But that's all meaningless when you understand the whole cyclical nature of things. Putting a number on something like that, once again, that goes back to the cult of quantum. That's trying to quantify something that doesn't really have a quantifiable nature to it. It's subjective. Time is subjective. And that's the thing. Time within nature, I should say, is a subjective thing. Time as measured by man is an objective thing. We measure it in seconds, minutes, hours, days, years, that kind of thing. But that's all a man-made measurement.
And then we think we know what it is.
Right. Then we think we know what it is. We look at nature and we say, okay, I could see some of this stuff going on. Let's quantify it. And we do our best to quantify it. But we miss
that PCR test.
Right. Exactly. And that's the same thing. So how many cycles are we going to assign to it? And we could get whatever measurement we want out of it that way. And that's exactly how it works. It's the same thing with time. And here's the other thing. Is there any way to prove if a second lasts longer now than it did at one point?
No.
No, there's not. We have no way to measure that. You ever have one of those days where your day is dragging and you feel like time is going so slow? Or if it's going by too fast? Well, this is not something that's inherently measurable, because you could look at the second hand on a clock. Does it ever tick any faster? Well, subjectively, you might look at it one day and see that it looks like it's going faster than you would think that it should. And then you look at it another day and it goes really
doesn't
slow.
Move at all.
But it's the same measure of time, see, according to the man-made system. So there's no way we could objectively know if times have quote unquote quickened. And there's always been talk in different occult philosophies and stuff like that of what they call the quickening, where time seems to go faster. And I mean, is that a real thing? Who could say? We have no way of objectively measuring it. All I know is all my days meld together anymore. The older I get, the faster time seems to go to me. So it's like, whereas, you know, when you're young, my mom told me this when I was younger too. She said, the older you get, the faster time seems to go. And I found that to be true, because it's like, now all my days and weeks and months and everything blend together. I can't believe it's going to be March already. You know, it's that's the way that it goes. And, you know, is this something that you could objectively measure? No, it can't. Does the passage of time occur the same way for everybody? Well, you could probably say, no, it does not. So, but there's no way to objectively measure that. See?
But a lot of that has also to do with how your mental perception is. Let's say you're sitting in a theater or an opera and you are enjoying that show of 3 hours, and somebody else sitting next to you is thinking, I'm going to die here. If I have to listen to this for 10 more minutes, I freak out. So to that person, this entire evening or these 3 hours will be torture. And it definitely will seem as if it never ends. The same goes, let's say, if a teacher goes into his class to teach. So the one who thinks, oh, wow, I'm going to have to teach these monkeys again. And then you have the other one that might think, oh, today, interesting. Let us see how many little Einsteins we have there. So I guarantee you the first one will have the worst, a worse day than the second one. So a lot of that has to do with our perception.
Absolutely. And see, that's the thing. Our perception of time outside of nature is skewed. And that's the whole point. The only way to accurately really measure time is look at the sky clock. It's in nature. See, you know, when the sun's directly overhead, it's noon in nature. Whereas, you know, your clock may not necessarily represent that. And even if there are minuscule changes in what time would seem like to us, like depending on our perception, we could still know it's noontime when the sun's directly overhead. See, and that's the thing. And this all ties back to these cyclical ideas once again, you know, how time is something a little more abstract that we've kind of turned into an artificial keeper of this place that we live. So it's one of those things where we can't objectively measure, does time pass faster or slower right now as compared to, you know, some other time? There's no way to know that. It's not measurable. And that's the thing. So we could have some common experience subjectively, but we can't objectively measure it. So if somebody is at the opera and they're suffering, they're listening to the opera, time was dragging, but the other person that's sitting next to them is truly enjoying it. And they're like, oh, it's over already. And the other person's like, what do you mean? That was terrible. You know, so like it's that kind of a thing. So see, subjectively, we experience the same thing, but objectively, it's not measurable in that way. So, and that's the same thing outside of nature. The measurement of time is not really accurate. And there's no way to really say for sure, even how long that this world has existed. We can't say that with any amount of certainty whatsoever, just based upon these different ideas. It's all subjective when it comes down to it. And our science attempts to push this hyper-materialist view and objectify everything, make it an objective measurement when it's clearly not. So there's no way that we could know certain things. And science would try to convince us otherwise through this cult of quantum or trying to measure things. Now, a lot of this stems back to philosophical ideas as well. And see, that's the thing. The controllers of this world are familiar both with ancient philosophy and these different alchemical sciences. as well as they are with what we call our science today. And they're the ones that are actually steering agendas with this. See, they try to make things line up in certain ways so that we believe that this operates in a way that it doesn't. And that's kind of the tact I come from when I look at these things. When you realize the world's been misdescribed to us, everything, like 99% of everything we know has been misdescribed to us. So when you look at things from that vantage point and come with a fresh set of eyes, the world begins to change when you look at it and you start to do your own experimentation and thought processes on things using some of these more ancient ideas. You start to see the world in a different way.
Yeah. And going back to this idea, the Kali Yuga and the obsession with the outside world, that hardly anybody observes the inside world. And I think this idea of transhumanism fits perfectly into that. All the shortcuts.
Yep.
But you, as you said, you, the slaves, you will not get the shortcuts. You will not, that's all for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the whole thing. When you're speaking of it in those terms, everybody's obsessed with the outside world, everything around them. Okay. Whereas they're not looking inside. Spirituality comes from within, not from without. So that's why they're trying to eliminate the spiritual aspect of life from things, okay? So that people will accept nothing but the outward reality. And we could see this coming to fruition through things like artificial intelligence and virtual reality and augmented reality technologies. See, they want to take the consciousness of people out of the actual physical plane and put it into this complete construct, this virtual reality. And that's one step away from the transhumanist notion there. Because once they have your mind captured in that virtual space where you can't tell the virtual space from the real physical space, then they've got you. And that's kind of where it's going with the transhumanist push. They want to create a totally artificial reality that they could rule and control and be the gods of, because that's their ultimate goal in the end. These people and the highermost positions of power in this world, they want to be God in no uncertain terms. And they see this as being feasible through the use of this transhumanist idea. They see this as being able to be achieved within their lifetime through the use of these different high technologies, these transhumanist technologies. They could have total, absolute control over everything and everybody within this system. And that's exactly what they want. And they could have immortality. If they could upload their consciousness into a machine, that's the whole end game for them. So the whole question is, at the end of it, for them, is this: who's in control of it? And see, that's the big thing that many of these people at the top of this power structure, the ones that I would call the dark occultists that really control things behind the scenes, they're kind of duking it out as to who's going to ultimately be the one to be in control of this whole thing at the end of it all. See, because that's what they want. First, they want to get everything into this control grid, this technocracy, this artificial intelligence control grid, get everybody's brains, their internet of thoughts. And that's a real thing. Look it up, Internet of Thoughts. It's a subsystem of the Internet of Things that they have planned. They want everybody's mind hooked in to the grid. And at the end, it'll be just one entity in control of it all. Okay. And they're duking it out as to who gets to be that entity.
We already talked a little bit about the Georgia Guidestones. And recently it just hit me. So, sometimes I have these occurrences where a thought just hits me. And then I sit on it for a couple of days. There is this one commandment where it says, unite humanity under one living language. And I have a suspicion that they mean the hive mind.
Yeah, I
that it is not like Arabic, English,
Right. I would say you're probably onto something there. Like, I would say that's a definite feasible thing. That's exactly what they're looking for, this hive mind mentality. And they're only a couple steps away from that right now. I mean, look at out in public, everybody walking around covering their face, afraid of each other. It's kind of like a hive mind, isn't it? I mean, they buy into this whole idea. And this is through use primarily of something called the alchemical meme. People are very familiar with memes now, but that's an idea that has been lost on society for probably hundreds of years now, up until the internet era. People didn't understand what a meme was. A meme, the alchemical meme, it's a thought process that kind of takes off of its own, and it's kind of like a mind virus in a way. These ideas are encoded in a symbol, okay, and when they're encoded in a symbol, the human mind recognizes the archetype of the symbol, and it grabs onto the meaning, and then it proceeds to push forward this idea to the rest of the society that it comes in contact with. So it catches on and takes on a life of its own. And this is kind of very much related to a concept that they call in magic or occultism, something in the form of, say, an egregore or a tulpa. Same type of idea when it comes down to it. So when you see this alchemical meme, this is actually taking an idea and infecting the minds of others with this idea. And this has been used for centuries, probably even thousands of years, by the people that are steering world societies. Okay. This is, a tool used by the controllers to create thought processes in people and to make them, believe certain things or act on certain things. And this has been taken to a whole new level with the advent and the rise of the internet and social media. So memes are a very powerful tool, and they do utilize these all the time. And that's kind of what this idea represents. It's the same kind of thing that's been pushed forward here. So they use these different concepts to steer people toward capitulation to what they want. And we could see society has kind of been infected by this mind virus of sorts, walking around covering their face, afraid to go near each other, and just blindly following orders because an quote unquote expert told them so. Some dude in a white lab coat came out and said, "Oh, put 2 masks on now, even if you get the vaccine that we made for it, put 2 masks on. You got to be safe." And it's just ridiculous at this point.
You know who Christian Drosten is, yeah?
No, I do not.
He is the one who sold the PCR kits around the world.
Oh, okay. I know who you mean.
The one who convinced the WHO that there is a pandemic. And you know what? Now, then there are so many people on that. It seems he doesn't have a PhD, really. It was given to him. There is no paperwork, there is his how do you say that?
Fraud?
No, fraud. Okay, he didn't write his doctorate. Do you say
right. Doctorate? Yes.
Yeah. Might very well be.
Yeah. Well, that relates back once again to this whole idea of the alchemical meme, where if you put a title on somebody, it gives them somehow some more perceived expertise. So if you call somebody doctor, then people tend to take their viewpoint with a little bit more authority for some reason, just because they happen to have that title. And a perfect example of this is back in the 1980s, before a gentleman named Edward Bernays died. He went on the David Letterman show and had David Letterman introduce him as Dr. Edward Bernays. And then when Mr. Letterman asked him about it, he said, "Oh, I'm not really a doctor." But you see, when people hear the term doctor, then they tend to credit more authority to a figure than what they really should. And see, if anybody's not familiar with Edward Bernays, in 1921, he wrote a book called Propaganda, and he's the father of modern marketing techniques and public relations and this kind of thing. And he was a master manipulator of the human mind. And the people in places of power in this world took many of the things that he learned and utilize them even still today to the umpteenth degree. So if people want to look up Mr. Edward Bernays, you could see some of what he was involved in.
So these technocrats that would love to live forever and upload their consciousness into the cloud or a machine or what do I know? And is it possible that this stems from a very neurotic attitude towards age, disease, and ultimately death?
Well, here's my viewpoint, okay? And I've done a lot of background research into a lot of this, and some of it's not really provable by modern methods because we're dealing with the barriers of time, space, and revisionist history when we're looking at these things. But if you go back in depth and look at some of the various earliest stories of mankind, you come across what's commonly known in the Christian worldview as what they would call the Genesis chapter 6 experiment, okay, where you had the fallen angels coming down to mankind and mating with mankind's daughters, okay? So when you look back at a lot of this stuff, you see that there are these ancient ties, and this goes, once again, it's one of these things that crosses cultures and time barriers. You see there's always these stories of these angelic or godlike beings descending from on high and coming down and mating with humankind. And this even goes back into the mythologies like Zeus and like all of that stuff. When you go back and look at the myths and the legends of it all. So you have this concept of these godlike beings or fallen angelic beings mating with mankind and reproducing. Well, in the Genesis chapter 6 account of this produced offspring that they were called Nephilim. Okay. And these were regarded as giants, mighty men of old, it says in the scriptures. So these were the children of beings that do not belong in our physical reality and man, who is part of our physical reality. Now, when you look in Christian eschatology and different Christian theology with what had happened to these beings, it's been, kind of speculated and put forward by a lot of theologians and different scholars who look at these things, that the reason for the great flood of the Bible was to wipe these beings off the face of the earth. And that's what they claim has happened. And they also claim that the disembodied spirits of these beings actually roam the earth because they're trapped here. Okay. So here's my speculation. Okay. And it's pure speculation. I would say that a lot of what's going on, the reason behind these people wanting this transhumanist singularity is because they're being steered by these supernatural beings, per se. They're being prompted by these supernatural beings to bring about this thing so that they could physically manifest here once again. Because, see, in my viewpoint, I would speculate that these beings are trapped here spiritually. They're bound in this physical plane, disembodied, and they can't manifest physically unless through, say, a human body. And this is actually one of the reasons for transhumanism, as opposed to trying to just build an artificial intelligence, a machine per se. Because, see, mankind is the gateway between worlds.
Yeah.
And this falls back to a lot of ancient occult ideas as well. So with man being the actual gateway between worlds, this would be the primary way, the only way that these beings might be able to manifest once again in physical reality and become the gods of this place, is to manifest through the human being. And this would be possible through the use of something that doesn't belong here. Once again, a hybrid of something that doesn't belong here, as was back in the days of Noah, okay, with these Nephilim beings wandering around. So something that doesn't belong here is a completely artificially constructed thing, an artificial intelligence merged with humanity being the gate, with no spirit to call its own. Okay, and that's why they're pushing out these spiritual ideas and that kind of thing. Because they want to be able to manifest their spirit in these physical bodies, these physical shells, through the gateway that is the human being. And a lot of that, like I said, is speculative on my part, but it makes a lot of sense. And you can look back, and there are some different ideas in the occult literature and back in the biblical literature and all the other literature that kind of could correlate to this different idea. So that's my speculation as to what's going on. And Whether you believe any of this stuff or not is irrelevant, because there's people in positions of power in this world that wholeheartedly believe this stuff and act on it. So what they do with that information that they have, or their belief systems, will affect you. And that's exactly what people need to understand about that. So whether you think that's real or not, whether you think it's nonsense, keep in mind, there's people in positions of power in this world that wholeheartedly believe that and act upon it every day. So
it is so funny.
And what they do will affect you.
That is so funny. You almost used the same words. I wrote an article for my patrons, and because we are entering this season of sacrifice again.
And yeah, so, the Ides of March.
And so I explained it a little bit, and I said as well, I am willing to entertain the idea if maybe there weren't fallen angels. Maybe that story is totally made up. What do I know? I can entertain the idea, although I'm pretty convinced that that story happened. So, and I said the same, it doesn't matter what I think, because these bloodline families, the descendants of the Nephilim bloodlines, they believe it, they act on it. And if I happen to be at the wrong time, at the wrong place, then yeah, it will affect my life.
Absolutely. And that's something I could wholeheartedly agree with you on. It's the same conclusion I've come to through all of my research and my looking at these things as well. Whether you believe it or not, there's people in positions of power in this world that absolutely do, and they act upon it. And it's these royal family bloodlines. That's why they're obsessed with bloodlines. Okay. Because you could look back, in different Freemasonic and Rosicrucian literature and all these different secret societies, and you could find this tie-in back to bloodlines over and over and over again. And at the core of it, it always ties back to occultism and, these different ideas. And it goes back all the way back to, the very beginnings of history. In a lot of these orders, people believe that in the beginning, the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, first, Eve begat Cain, and Cain was begat through a fallen angel named Samael. Okay, this is what these people believe. This is not me. I don't believe this. I don't necessarily say this is true, but they believe that a fallen angel came down named Samael, impregnated Eve with Cain, and at the same time, Adam impregnated Eve with Abel, and she had these two children, Cain and Abel. And they were two separate bloodlines. See, Cain was a semi-divine bloodline. And that's what these people believe. They believe they're the descendants of Cain from this semi-divine bloodline. And they call themselves the philosophers of fire. And these ideas have been carried out through the ages. So Cain is the child of fire. Abel was the child of water. He was murdered by Cain. And he was replaced later by another offspring of Adam and Eve named Seth. So Seth was the line of the waters of faith. And all these ideas tie back to these elemental archetypes again. So Cain was the son of fire, and Abel was the son of the faith, the waters of faith. So see, you have your philosophers of fire and those of the waters of faith. And all the conflict in this world relates from that same archetype in the beginning. See, all the conflict in this world relates back to that. There's the philosophers of fire, or the sons of Cain, or those of the waters of faith, the sons of Seth. These are the people who practice religion, The philosophers of fire, these are the people that practice statecraft. So you have your priestcraft and your statecraft. And their mission throughout the ages has been to reunite these two distinct offices, the office of priestcraft and the office of statecraft, together into one in an alchemical marriage of sorts. And they succeeded in partially doing so through the advent of the Vatican, by merging ancient Rome with the church, the mainline Catholic Church. So they've succeeded in a sort of way, but that's only a very small step towards what they're looking for with this whole advent of technocracy. See, because that, once again, is going to be the union of this into what they call the Priesthood of Melchizedek. And this is an order, it's one of the secret orders in the secret societies. And this is one of their goals, is to rebring forth this combination of priestcraft and statecraft together. So you could see how the whole idea of the separation of church and state is a contrivance from the get-go. They work together very closely, always have.
Oh, yeah.
It's an illusion. It's an illusion. But see, they have that to keep you off the trail of this. And it all relates back to these elemental ideas. Like I said, fire and water, the merging of these things in what they call the molten sea. And this relates back to the priesthood of Melchizedek. Okay. Melchizedek, for those who don't know, back in the Bible, he was the first king of Salem, and he held the dual office of priest and king. He was the very first priest king, see? And all the emperors in Egypt and all those ancient cultures, they were priest kings, okay? They hold both offices. Now, something happened in ancient times and separated these two offices into separate areas. You had your kings or your monarchs and your priestcraft. Now, always secretly behind the scenes, the priestcraft has run things. And these are your ones that are within the secret societies even today. This is your true priestcraft. This is the power behind the scenes, okay? And they put these figureheads out there as your quote unquote, your statecraft, your statesmen, your presidents, your elected officials, your leaders, your kings, your rulers. They're figureheads, folks. They don't run anything. It's the priestcraft behind the scenes that does. But what they're trying to do is to bring these two offices together again into this merger of the perfect priesthood of Melchizedek. It's an occult idea. It's a philosophical idea, but it's something they very much want to do through the use of this technocracy. And this merging of the priestcraft, this perfect merging of the priestcraft, this alchemical marriage between the priestcraft and the statecraft, which they partially achieved through the Vatican, is going to be achieved through the advent of technocracy, through the use of artificial intelligence. They plan to merge the artificial intelligence with the human being, the human consciousness, to do this. This is what they would call their achieving of their quote unquote great work, or the bringing about of what they call the Philosopher's Stone. This is what it's about, and it's about transcending our human form here now and becoming something more. This is the evolution of mankind. This is how they teach this. This is what they teach within the topmost levels of these secret societies. This is what they want. This is what they're aiming for. They want to become God. They think they can do it through merging man with machine at this point, through using these technologies and these different old occult ideas in combination with these new technologies they have to bring this about. And this is what transhumanism is all about. That is the philosophical spirit behind transhumanism, is this whole thing, okay? These thought processes. Now, this is a lot of heavy stuff for people to take in, but this is where my research has led me through the years. And I've been looking at this stuff for a good long time now, just so people know. I don't expect anybody to believe anything I have to say. Go look for yourself. See what conclusions you come up with. But I'm telling you, like, if you start looking back in the old occult scriptures and all these old occult books and occult ideas from the secret societies that were, up until the advent of the internet, they were kept secret from everybody. They were hidden away in these libraries of these secret societies. You had no access to them. When you start looking at these things that they reveal in secret within their texts, and they don't reveal everything. Most of the major secrets are only told orally from one initiate to another. But the things that they do put down in writing are pretty telling, even, on the face of it, when you start to actually dig in and look at these older texts. There's a lot of value in those older texts. And they're still hard to find, even though most of them are available for free because of the internet. You could find them archived in different places, and you have to dig for some of them, but they're out there. And I would encourage people, go look at this stuff and then look at what's going on today. And, if you could put 2 and 2 together, you'll see how it all adds up.
So where would we look, and what would be a title that is worth researching?
I would say just go back, look at anything written before the 1930s that are some kind of books within these different secret societies. Look up Freemasonic books, look up Rosicrucian books, look up even things from, say, the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, any of these type groups. And there's a lot of secret societies with different names that are all tied together at the topmost levels. But if you go back and you look through some of these texts, and like I said, the best ones are anything dated before 1930, because that's before what we would call the modern edit. You'll see there's a lot of things in these books that really people would not believe is even there, written in some of them. I would recommend also look at the writings of specific authors. If you could find anything written by Manly P. Hall, look at what he has to say. If you find something written by a gentleman named Reuben Swinburne Clymer from the Rosicrucian Order, read what he has to say. Go back, look at Arthur Edward Waite, look at his writings, look at the writings of Eliphas Levi.
Albert Mackey.
Mackey, yes, Albert Mackey. All of these different guys, look at what they have to say. Even Albert Pike, look at his Morals and Dogma book. There's a lot of things in there that are very telling as well. Any of these type sources, you could go back and look through, and there's a lot of them, a lot of different books and stuff that are really odd names that you wouldn't think there's anything much in that would be interesting, and you find a lot of stuff. The older the book and the more obscure, sometimes the more obscure things you'll find in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that maybe you can record this very weird email when Pompeo declassified items of Hillary Clinton's emails, where they asked about Gilgamesh, the resurrection chamber.
I do remember seeing something about that. Yeah, like all of these things, they all tie together. Now, I would say that's probably coded language, honestly, in my view, because how a lot of these people communicate within the secret societies is they use coded language and coded symbolism in order to convey some kind of an esoteric idea to each other that's different from what the exoteric text would say. So without the key to decipher that, it's hard to say for sure what that would mean. But you could rest assured that they do use these different methods, and they use them openly in public society. This is as simple as something as a different kind of a handshake on TV, to different odd wording of things like, when George Bush Sr. back in 1990 was talking about 1,000 points of light. That's a very occult reference, folks, just so you know. That's coded language. They use this stuff all the time. And they use it to communicate with other initiates or adepts within their secret orders that they have. And it's stuff that the public will overlook and think nothing of, because they don't have the cipher or the key to translate what that means. That's why it's important to look into the language of symbology. Because if you understand the symbols they use and the different metaphors they use, you'll understand sometimes when they say something that sounds a little bit odd, what they're talking about. Like before the election here in the US, Joe Biden started talking about a dark winter. It's going to be a dark winter. Do you know what dark winter is? It was a program that they put forward, a training drill they put forth relating to, what was it? I think it was the plague or something like that, releasing the plague, some kind of a simulation of releasing of the plague. And it's also an allusion to dark skies events, which is power outages. And what are we seeing across the South here in the US, all across Texas? Power outages. See, he said it before he was even elected. It's happening. And people need to start putting two and two together with this stuff. They give coded messages all the time.
I don't need you to be elected president.
Right.
His audience.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. I mean,
yeah,
presidents are selected, not elected. I mean, we're just given our choice between these two figureheads. The office of
Sorry, isn't that frustrating when you see people bickering about Trump or Biden or Obama and this and that, whoever it is? I'm always sitting there and, oh no, please.
Yep. Yeah, the whole two-party system, classic Hegelian dialectic.
mean, we have so many parties here, but it's not any different.
No. When you realize that all these elected officials, they're put up there because, first of all, they're blackmailable. Okay, that's the main reason they're there. They could be controlled by the people really in charge. And second of all, they're just willing figureheads. They're willing scapegoats. Like any president or leader of a country, that's a willing scapegoat. They took that job to take on the brunt of the people's hate. That's what they're there for. It's a very occult idea and philosophical idea that goes way back. The idea of the scapegoat. If people aren't familiar with what a scapegoat is, or the old mythological version of what a scapegoat is, go look it up. That's what a president is for. They're the scapegoat. You think Donald Trump, when he was president here, he was abused every day for the 4 years he was in office? Like, seriously, publicly disgraced and abused by the news media. Well, this creates a type of energetic form within the social pool of people, I would say, the social consciousness. See, that's what that's all about. That's this, this generated emotional force directed at the public at large. It was channeled into this scapegoat. See, and they use that energy in a very occult way to do different things. And now they've switched it up. Now he's out of office, see. But he was a willing scapegoat. Keep that in mind. He was willing to go up there and take all this abuse because the payoff for him in the end is probably way better than what it would be if he refused to go along with their program here.
Yeah, but Wayne, don't you know that he will be inaugurated after March 4th? Or maybe mid-April?
Yeah, that Q told me so, right? I find that whole thing laughable too, but that's just me. The whole Q phenomenon has been a psyop from the get-go. And I've been telling people that all along. It's just, people want to believe what they want to believe. And that all goes back to the cognitive dissonance idea.
It has to feel good. It does not have to make sense. It has to feel good.
Right. And that's one of the main tools that they use to control people is emotions, fear primarily. They use fear as a control mechanism, and it's one of the primary control mechanisms and motivators that there is. So, that's why they ramp up the fear. And if you're afraid enough, you'll listen to what they tell you without even thinking about it.
Yeah, with Q, I always thought this is hope porn.
Yeah, that's the thing. They always have to present some kind of an alternative too. Once again, that goes back to the whole Hegelian dialectic control mechanism. So they offer you this alternative narrative here. Oh, this is what's really happening. And what this does is this silences the critics and keeps people from actually doing something on their own to change things. See, it causes inaction in people who may otherwise try to take action against some kind of an injustice. But if you put this savior figurehead up there and claim, okay, this is what's going to happen, oh, don't worry, Trump's going to drain the swamp. Okay, well, we've been waiting 4 years. What's going on here? Hillary's still not locked up.
Can't you give him a little bit more time?
Yeah. Oh, it's really going to happen come March or April. No, it's not.
And then it will be delayed again and again. But I have to say, I'm really shocked how many people, especially in the so-called the echo chambers of the alternative media, how many people jumped on that wagon?
Absolutely. Wow. A lot of them did. And, that's the sad part. And some of them are sincere, but they're sincerely wrong. And, what could you do about that? I mean, people do want to try to grab onto some kind of hope here for things, but putting your hope in the wrong place is not going to help. And that's what these people are masters of. They're masters of steering your energy and your hope into this wrong place. Yeah. See, and that's exactly what they did. So this is the twofold kind of use of this willing scapegoat that was Donald Trump. Not only was he taking all the hate from the people that were his detractors, but he was also gathering together this positive energy from those that were his supporters, the ones that really believed in this Q narrative and stuff like that. So, I mean, you're talking, there's a tremendous amount of spiritual energy being focused into one place. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that is a very important idea in occult philosophy. The direction of people's will and thought into one place, the focusing of this. This is basically kind of the concept of how prayer works as well. Same kind of idea. There's an inherent natural energy behind it. And focusing all this energy into one place, one willing scapegoat type figure, that has some tremendous possibilities to anybody who practices the occult arts, the harnessing of this energy. So you could see how directing people's energies towards this idea really could be used to manifest whatever kind of thing they want with it. So that, Trump did a masterful job of getting people to hate him and to love him. So he was a perfect actor to fill the part. And that's the thing. All the world's a stage. And, we just play our part on the stage. And, it's no different with world leaders.
No, absolutely not. And that is how let's say, separate the nonsense from what might be interesting to follow, is the Savior program. It has a Savior program attached to it. I kick it out right away. I don't even bother digging deep, and then come up with bullshit like he will be the 19th president in April. Yeah.
No, I'll believe that when I see it. Let's put it that way. That's not happening. That's just more hope porn, as you called it. That's pretty much what that is. It's people putting their trust in the wrong place. Sorry, this guy's as sleazy as they get. Okay, don't make no mistakes about it. He's as sleazy as they get. First of all, what's on his resume? Actor. He's an actor. He's dishonest from the get-go because of that. Second of all, he's been look at what he's done within his lifetime, the business dealings and everything like that, dealing with the mob, the New York mob. I mean, it's well known in public circles that he's dealt with the mob and stuff like that. Like, he's no angel, and people know it, but they've just, putting this focus on him, he's here to save us and that kind of thing. No, man, that's not what he's there for. Like, you don't understand. And that's the whole thing. It's all part of this false paradigm we're in, this left-right paradigm that people just buy into. It's the us versus them mentality. And the controllers of this world are masters of manipulating this in people. The whole us versus them type of a thing. They put you on a team and they section you off with your own group, and they put you in your own echo chamber. That's what they do. That's how they maintain control.
Yeah, same with GameStop. Yay! We against Goliath. Bullshit.
Yeah, that was all a controlled op from the get-go too.
Yeah, sure. Of course. UBS, JP Morgan, they all made a lot of money.
Absolutely. The ones that always make a lot of money are the ones that made a lot of money. In fact, with everything going on in society right now, with this whole pandemic situation, it's been the largest transfer of wealth in human history to the very topmost levels of the power structure. Once again, your very wealthiest people have made billions and billions through this whole thing, while the average person has suffered. And it's been the largest transfer of wealth in human history. And people need to see it for what it is. It's fraud. All of it's fraud. They don't care about your health, never have. It's all about transferring the wealth, even more so, into the hands of the select few. And this is an idea that's explored in a document called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. People should look that one up and read it cover to cover. I'm telling you, it lays out, what they do with these different situations. But it says in Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars that the whole objective is to transfer the wealth of the undeserving many to the deserving and hardworking few. And that's exactly what's going on. It's wealth redistribution, but the redistribution only goes to the select people that they find, quote unquote, worthy to wield that at the topmost levels. That's what this has all been about.
And I also think that, Bitcoin and so forth, that's not the great liberation either. And I'm not condemning people who have Bitcoins and are into cryptocurrencies, but with Bitcoin, 20% of people that own Bitcoin own 80%.
Yep. I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So, this is the same pattern again, that a few accumulate a lot.
Yep.
So I don't see how that in the long run is very liberating.
No, it's not. And the whole argument for that is it's decentralized. Yeah. Okay. It's decentralized. All right, but the central banks already have a plan for a cryptocurrency of their own that they're going to implement worldwide. And not only that, this whole idea of it being decentralized um, is not very liberating, because just because it's decentralized, it's on a blockchain utility. It doesn't ever lose data. This would be the biggest loss of human freedom if we ever adopt this system as a form of currency, because then guess what? And this will never happen. And I'll tell you exactly why this will never happen, why this will never catch on. Because first of all, the black market will be unable to exist with such a said utility. And the elites and power brokers of this world need a black market where they could secretly transfer cash and do things. So this will never take hold simply because of that. Not in the form that we see it, but rest assured, they will put forward a cryptocurrency of sorts, a digital currency, a one world digital currency backed by central banks to replace this idea. See, and maybe Bitcoin will be used for this black market type of thing when they buy up all the Bitcoin, and nobody else will have Bitcoin except for, the people that trade and buy and sell within the black markets. But the rest of us will be stuck with a digital world bank currency of sorts. And we've actually explored this idea on our Secrets of Saturn live stream a couple of weeks back, where we looked at the plans that are in the works for a central bank digital currency. They've been working on it.
What they did in China?
What did they do in China?
They have, there are several large experiments going on. Bahamas is having one, and China is having several. And there they did the following. They had a lottery, 50,000 people. They won a direct account with the central bank. And then they got 200 yuan into their wallet.
Free money. Got to always be suspicious of free money.
But that wallet, that money was only valid for 6 days. Then if you tried on the 7th day to spend it, it was no longer possible. So, and also you could not, let's say, put it into your credit card, or it was purely for consumption. Anything else, it was programmed in a way that it was blocked. Yeah. So, and now imagine, and I always have a feeling when they do trials like that, then they are thinking about maybe we should limit the time that this money has any value.
Well,
and then you will never be able to save anything.
Right. And that's an interesting concept in and of itself as well. Now let's go a step further. Now, are you familiar with the social credit score idea in China?
Yeah.
Now tie a social credit score directly to your bank account like that. And if you get out of line, if you criticize the government, well, guess what? We're going to shut off your ability to spend your money in your account now. So now you can't buy the things you need. We'll shut that off for 6 days. You see, this creates obedience in people in another way, because if you control their ability to spend or their ability to earn wages or a living, well, then guess what? You have total control over them. And if they do that, they tie this whole idea of social credit score to that, then you know what? You're going to fall in line and do what they say, whether you like it or not. And that's exactly what they're going for. They will eventually tie the whole social credit score idea into the currency. It's being worked on right now. Mm-hmm. It's being worked on in a test market in Africa right now with Gavi and MasterCard, along with Bill Gates, with the whole vaccine idea. See, it's all tied together, folks. That's the whole thing right there. They're going to tie it all together, all your biometric data. They're collecting all your data. They've been doing it for years. Big data is the new form of currency. Data is more valuable than money right now. And that's the bottom line. That's why companies collect data, because they have all your data. They're going to collect your biometrics, your genome. They'll even collect your genome. They're going to tie it directly to your bank account and to your social credit score, so that if you're not a good little slave, well, guess what? You can't buy bread this week. You're not going to eat. That's what it's all about. And they use China as a test market for these things as well. And we could see, and then they roll it out into the West via Australia first, and then they port it over to the rest of the Western world. So we see that going on right now, don't we?
Yeah. So let me briefly go back to, yeah, here we go. So now let's say we finally got it. We understand what these cycles are all about. Now, do you think it's possible to counteract that? Let's say we have an idea when the Kali Yuga starts, and we comprehend that it has a lot to do with being focused solely on the outside world. No inner, not a lot of things going on in the inside world. And we would not fall into that trap deliberately. That, I mean, that, of course, that might be exhausting because the energy is in a way that it facilitates this concentration on the outside world. But do you think it would be able, if we had enough consciousness, to trick this so that even a Kali Yuga or a Dwapara Yuga could be a good time?
Absolutely, I do. I think we still have a chance to turn this around, and we could do so by focusing on more spiritual things and getting back to nature, separating a little bit from our technology and from the rat race that is the modern world. Get back to more important things, more moral ideas. Get back to morals and integrity, things like that. More spiritual ideas. Get close to God. Get close to your Creator. Pray. Get out in nature, enjoy nature more. Go out and observe nature. Get away from the computer screen. Get away from, the civilized world. Go out in the woods. Take a walk through the woods, that kind of thing. Get back to natural ideas. Learn how to farm, how to grow things for yourself, how to grow food. These kind of things, the things that have gone on through human history. Be more independent. And be able to be more self-sufficient. These ideas, because see, once you fall into the centralized control idea and you fall into this being dependent upon, say, government or whomever to supply all your needs, well, then they got you. But if you're self-sufficient, well, then, hey, you don't need them. And guess what? They need you. They need your, not only your compliance, they need your consent to be part of their system. And if you don't give them your consent, this is kind of a metaphysical law. I call it the law of metaphysical consent. Mm-hmm. If they don't have your metaphysical consent, they can't do something to you or include you in their plans. So if you remove your consent from their system, it won't stand. And that's the bottom line. And if enough of us do not consent to their system, and we wake up enough people that they don't consent to their system, then their whole house of cards falls. They can't do what they want then. And then they have to capitulate back to the public.
Mm. I know that this spiritual law is in effect, and I have witnessed it quite a number of times. But so now we are affected worldwide, and majorities are still going along with the narrative. So now, let's say the majorities do not comprehend it, they do not wake up. What happens to those that are not giving their consent in that scenario?
Well, see, here's the thing. I mean, there's a couple ways to look at this. Now, first of all, we don't need necessarily the majority to to not consent to this, to not give their consent to this. What we need is that parietal split of 80-20. If we could get above 20% of the people saying no to this whole system, then it falls. That's all you need. You don't need a huge majority of people to make that happen. But secondly, what I could see happening is we'll just have people sectioning off into their own little communities. It'll be kind of like, those of us that don't want to go with the system, we won't be herded into the city centers, into the smart city, like the rest of the public will be. They'll be herded into their super smart city or whatever they want to call it, and controlled everything they do from cradle to grave, from the time they wake up in the morning till they go to bed at night every night. And probably even they'll control their dreams at that point too. But beyond that, there will be those of us who will have to exist outside the city limits and be self-sufficient, little farming communes and things like that. I foresee that being a thing. And now probably we're going to have run-ins with the authorities and stuff like that. But at the same token, they can't violate the law of metaphysical consent. So they're going to have to put up with that to some degree or another. And they'll probably look at that the same way they look at, the Amish people here in the United States. I don't know if you're familiar with the Amish people, but they live in their own little communities. They don't have modern technologies or contrivances. They're self-sufficient on everything. Their little community goes on without interference from the outside world. It's probably going to be something similar to that. So,
we are all Amish now.
Yeah, that's the thing. So that's why I tell people, try to become self-sufficient, learn how to do stuff for yourself, because, if you're going to want to access any of the services and, products that these smart cities have, or that the, society at large has, if you want to participate in any way, shape, or form, well, then you're going to have to comply with what they want. So, I mean, if you learn to do stuff for yourself and become self-sufficient and not depend on them for everything, then you'll be in a much better place and you'll be closer to the natural world. And I think at some point, the idea of this technological control grid is going to fall. I think we're approaching a Tower of Babel moment with that, where the whole thing's going to come down, because see, here's the thing. Nature always self-corrects. Okay, so something like that's not going to stand for long. And even if you look at it from a purely what they would call scientific viewpoint, there's the law of what's it called? Entropy. The law of entropy, where all things eventually devolve into chaos. And this is why you have stuff like city structures breaking down. This is why we have to fix the roads and stuff all the time. You have all of these things falling apart and nature taking over. Like a good example of this is, look at Chernobyl in Russia. They abandoned it. It's all grown over now. Like nature came back within a year and they said, it would never happen. Nothing could ever live there again. And it's all, nature has thrived in that area. And that's what happens. Nature will come in and it'll cover everything up. And this is why ancient civilizations are still being found buried beneath, how many feet of dirt everywhere. Like it's this kind of thing. Nature will just grow over the top of it and take back over. So that's going to happen. So I would say that in order for technocracy to work and survive and thrive, the maintenance is going to become a major issue for them, because they'll have to maintain constant vigilance to fight this whole entropy idea, this nature idea, the idea of fighting off nature and maintaining this whole system. So it's going to require constant repair and upkeep. And it's going to get to the point where eventually they're not going to be able to keep it up, especially if they try to expand it. So it's going to fall, and it's going to fall to Mother Nature. So I see that as being another Tower of Babel moment. So even if they succeed with their transhumanist plan and putting this technocracy in these smart cities and stuff in place, it's only going to be a short-lived thing.
So you are quietly hopeful.
Oh, yes, I'm very hopeful.
Optimistic.
I'm optimistic, and I think a lot more people are becoming aware of these things going on and are more open to it now than they've ever been before, because they're looking around and they're saying, hey, we got the vaccine now. Why do we have to wear 2 masks now? Like, seriously, they're overreaching way too much, and they're pushing just to see what they could get away with. And now it's the point where it's pushing people over the edge, and they're finally starting to say, enough already. And I personally know a couple people that were wholeheartedly believing this whole narrative and buying into it up until very recently, when they realized, wait a minute, you get the vaccine, you still need to wear a mask, and not only 1, you got to wear 2. And now there's all these new strains and we need to be locked down again. And now I'm not going to be able to go watch my sports team in person again. And they're starting to say, enough. It's enough. It's a bridge too far for most people now. So they're starting to wake up to it and become more receptive to these type of ideas and understand there's something more at play here than what they're saying.
Yeah. Next stop, climate lockdowns.
Yeah, that'll be coming too, I'm sure. You know.
Yeah, it's already being discussed.
Yep, it's been being discussed a long time. That's all a bunch of nonsense too, contrived nonsense, but you know, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. So that was really, really a very interesting conversation. I thank you very much for coming on the show. And yeah, I hope you come back. There is a ton of subjects that I would like to go over with you.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. Just let me know and we could arrange a date and I'll come back on. I always enjoy going on different platforms and reaching new people and listening to other people's opinions. And it's always very gratifying for me when I go on with somebody and you know what? You've discovered a lot of the same things I have in your own personal research. And we've never truly crossed paths up until we were just on with Mark Gray a couple weeks back. I had no idea who you were. You had no idea who I was. And then...
Well, I had an idea who you were.
Oh, well.
I even sent you an email if you come on the show and I never got a reply.
I apologize for that.
It doesn't matter. It happens so many times. I guess some people, they really get a lot of...
I get a ton of emails in a day's time. So if I'm not looking for something specific, a lot of times I'll miss it. So for that, I do apologize. But I always appreciate the opportunity to come on.
And then after we had that panel discussion, I thought I'd try another time.
Well, it worked. If you want me on again, just, you know, send me a message and we'll arrange something. I appreciate it. I really, truly do. Yeah.
So guys, that was it. Night Flight for today with the wonderful Wayne McRoy. His books, his YouTube channel, all that will be linked below as usual. Stay safe from tyranny, stay sound out there, and until next time, bye-bye. And now